All right, well, here we go. This is my last session for the 2015 Alleluia. I've apologized to every class that I've presented to, and I will apologize to you guys as well, although now then I think most of you have heard my apology. But I have a nice handout that I spent much time trying to create, and I left Austin in a hurry and had not copied everything. And so the folks at our hotel were nice enough to copy my handouts for me, and they did it for free. So, beggars can't be choosers. I appreciate them doing that. However, something is going on with their handout where there is a line that is coming through the page. So it's there. You guys might think it's intentional. It's not intentional, but it is going to have to be what it is. How many, I gave this session 2 years ago when I was here at Alleluia last time as a clinician. I remember giving this particular session. Was anyone here during that session? Did anyone attend that session? Okay.
I was here when you were here.
Okay, sure. Well, the reason I say that is that with each one of the sessions, I'm sure I've given these before here, but the piano arranging and stuff like that, those are things that people again and again want, pianists to give because there's so many folks that are interested in doing that. And if you had been here to this session before, I was going to give you the opportunity to politely, leave and not hurt my feelings at all, because this is in fact going to be some of the same material that I covered last time, and I didn't want to bore you with that if there was another session that you were interested in going to. I love accompanying, love it. I started out college trying to, be a concert pianist, and through a wide variety of events that did not happen. In some of my other sessions, I've talked about some of the reasons why that didn't happen. I came down with a hand injury, and while I was trying to recover from that hand injury, it is what actually started me on the writing path. And had it not been for that injury, that little detour in the road, I might not have began doing the writing and arranging, which I enjoy infinitely more than what I was doing with trying to be a performer. Through the years, I have developed a real love for accompanying. And in every school I've served as a teacher, I've always accompanied one or more ensembles. I've been accompanying church choirs, of course, my entire life. And then as I've gotten older and went through college and then began teaching college, I had the opportunity to begin accompanying those ensembles as well. And it seems to me, and the interesting thing is, one other thing I'd like to say is that not only have I accompanied, but probably like many of you, I'm assuming you're pianists, I've also directed, as I'm sure you have. If you have not, it's kind of interesting because I see things from both perspectives. What the frustrated accompanist who just says, gosh, this director just doesn't get how I work. And then on the other side of the coin is the director that's saying, why doesn't this accompanist understand how I work? And so it's kind of interesting, the little balance between the two. I've taught for 8 years at Sterling College out in Kansas, and of all the things that I'll miss, two things I'll miss the most. I'll miss my students, but I'll miss working with our choral director there. His name is Mark Clark. He's also a great tune writer. I have quite a few pieces of his that he's written that I've arranged through the years that Shawnee and Lorenz and a few other folks have published. But Mark and I have the most wonderful relationship. And he is the choral director there, and I was his accompanist for 8 years. And it's just the perfect relationship that you want to have with a colleague that you work with. And so while I was working with him, I began to think in my analytical mind, why is this clicking along so well? And why is this working so well? And so I've compiled a little list here, which I have divided up between what I call the professional and personal qualities of a great accompanist. Most of these are going to be obvious. So obvious, in fact, we're going to zip right through them. Okay, we'll talk briefly about them, but then we're going to get to musical qualities of a great accompanist, which is where we'll camp a little bit more, because there I can give you some practical exercises to kind of help your accompany. There is a wonderful book out, The Relationship Between the Director and the Accompanist. There's a great book out, and it's put out, I probably have it. I have a bibliography here on the back. I do. And it's Choral Questions and Answers, Volume 5, Accompanying. It's put out by Pianist Publishing. I might have a copy of it in my briefcase. When the session's over, I'll look. But in that book, Alan Petker writes this. Okay, and I want to read this quote to you. I don't want to bore you by reading quotes, but I am going to read this one. It's describing the relationship between the director and an accompanist. The relationship between a director and an accompanist might be comparable to a two-person boat crew. One is the skipper and one is the mate, yet both are needed to run the ship. In fact, a good mate not only makes the boat run well, the mate also looks the skipper look good. Okay? He goes on to say that a good accompanist can not only make a director look good, but can actually save the day. On the other hand, an accompanist that does not understand the nature of how this relationship is supposed to function can hold back the rehearsal and therefore an entire choir. So, knowing that, let's kind of briefly go through some personal and professional qualities of a great accompanist. Dedicated, dependable, and punctual. It does not matter if you're, accompanying for a church choir or accompanying for a collegiate ensemble. The leaders of the group always model, to the other folks, and you can't expect, 100% from your members if the director and your accompanist are not, obviously giving it all that you can give it. And so you want to work on your music, obviously. I mean, this is, be 100% prepared when you come to rehearsal. This is the kind of common sense stuff that I say I'm going to just zip right through because we're all performing pianist and accompanist. But I think it's probably good to remind ourselves of this. Dedicated, dependable, and of course punctual. Good sense of humor. I love working with directors that I can kind of have a little bit of a comedy routine within limits going with, back and forth with. I say a comedy routine within limits because I'll joke around with the director. I'll do things at the piano that kind of liven up the rehearsal a little bit. I'll joke some with the students. However, they can't, I say students, it could be your choir members at church. I'm used to being in a collegiate setting. That can't go overboard, though, because it can't disrupt the rehearsal, and you can't joke around with the director so much that you begin to undermine him being the boss or her being the boss, whatever the case may be. I've worked with directors before as an accompanist that they were so cruel to me, and I won't name any names, but I could go down the list of one gentleman in particular, that it's just a wonder I survived. And there was no chance to kind of have that rapport with him. And then there's other people that I've worked with, like Mark Clark, who is the guy that I'm leaving, that we would have a lot of fun. I love as an accompanist, I love if the timing is right, doing something that kind of can enliven the rehearsal. Sometimes our old director would sometimes have soloists come down to the front, and if he says, "Hey, you, Stephanie, whoever, come on down," I might do something like, a little Price is Right or something, Although nowadays, as the kids get older, that quote is lost on them. They don't know The Price is Right. They don't know Bob Barker either. You guys remember The Price is Right, of course. So a good sense of humor, I think, is very helpful. Moving right along, these are common sense stuff. We're not camping on them. Selfless. This is actually something I will say. When you are an accompanist, I have learned that the way to be the best accompanist that I can be is to be selfless. A lot of times in our church work, and I say this very carefully because we might have some directors in the room too, but a lot of times the pianist is the most educated musician in the group. Particularly if you're working at a small church, you might have a guy that doesn't read music well, but he's got a decent voice and he's willing, to get up and direct. And yet you're the accompanist and you might have an extensive musical background that the director doesn't have. A lot of times the pianist will be the most educated person in the group, and with that knowledge, some pianists can kind of become not selfless but a little bit selfish, and begin to direct the rehearsal from behind the keyboard and undermine and do other things. You have to, as an accompanist, be very willing to mentally put yourself second, right? You put the director of the group and the director's vision for the group ahead of your own vision. I even go as far as, to be totally honest, when I would direct or play for choirs, if they make a mistake and I know it, and I've saved the day, and as a pianist, you've all saved the day, right, for singers that come in early or come in late, I even take the responsibility and blame on myself. I'll say, well, I came in a little bit early, sorry, you found me. And of course, no, I found them. But I want to be so selfless to the ensemble and that I'm willing to kind of sacrifice a little bit of, well, it's you that messed up, kiddo, not me. I sacrifice that attitude and kind of just lay it at the altar of the greater good, and choirs respect that, and they sense that. And directors, sense that as well. Patience. And this will be the last thing before we begin to camp here with number 3. I think that the last personal quality that you need to develop as an accompanist is patience. Why might you need patience?
Because you have to go over and over and over the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. How many times, do I have to play this little counter melody for the tenors and basses? It's in unison and it's just half notes and we've been working on it 6 weeks. Don't they have it? Well, you know what? If you're called to accompany, you've got to lovingly and with Christ-like patience play it again, right? If you're working with a director that might not be as strong a musician as yourself, you have to be patient with that, right? The rehearsals can be long and tedious, and so you always kind of have to show humility and grace and a lot of patience, I think, when you're in a rehearsal setting. So that's it. Those are my personal and professional qualities: dedicated, dependable, and punctual, good sense of humor, selfless, and patient. There's probably others that could be added to that list, but to me that sums up a good portion of it. All right, now we get into some musical qualities, and along with this, I'm going to throw out some things you can do maybe to help become a better accompanist. The church world is so varied right now in the amount of styles that choirs sing and that praise teams sing, that you have to be very familiar with a lot of different styles of music, okay? You don't want to be, someone that, okay, when you put a Marquez arrangement of a gospel thing in front of me, that I sound like a classical pianist trying to play jazz, Or if you put, something that Craig Courtney might write at Beckenhorst and it's got a little bit of a Brahmsian approach to it, you need to be able to get sounds from the piano and know the kind of style that is going to add to and not detract from the overall sound world, that the arrangement is trying to create. What are some ways that you become familiar with different styles of music? Listening is at the top of the list. It absolutely is. I can't stress the importance of listening enough. As a former college teacher, I was appalled. They video these things, so if this goes on YouTube one of these days or something like that, or iTunes, sorry, Sterling College students, but I was appalled at their listening. They would maybe know the Beethoven Fifth Symphony, but so much of the repertoire, they would know. Well, as church pianists living in the world that we live in now, knowing that we have to accompany all these different styles, you have to actively listen not only to what you love and what you're comfortable with, but you've got to listen to something else. If you are a person that only, wants to play the traditional hymn music, that's great, but you need to get outside right now and immediately buy yourself a Nicole Nordman or a Chris Tomlin record or something like that and absorb that, right, and really, really understand it. You need to go to the store and get a Charlie Parker CD and listen to bebop, You know, I was telling the group this morning that when I was out for my run yesterday, I say out for my run, I was on the treadmill. It's too hot to go running outside, but I was laughing at myself because within the space of about 20 minutes running on that treadmill, some Morton Lauridsen came on, I remember that. Some Charlie Parker came on next. I had it on, switch around. Luckenbach, Texas came up with Willie and Waylon and the boys. And so all this stuff just funnels around on my iPod because I'm listening to it constantly. And that allows me, when that style comes across my desk, I understand a little bit about, on a deeper level of how to make it sound correct. Going and buying solo repertoire, this is an accompanist class, but going and buying solo repertoire that is in other styles is very helpful. Go find a Mark Hayes jazz arrangement, or a Craig Curry jazz arrangement. Go pick up something that Craig Curry might do with Latin styles. He writes a lot of Latin styles, and get the metronome on and see if you can, get that bossa nova feel, going. I don't know if you'd ever need a bossa nova as a choral, piece, but who knows? That almost sounded like "Why Does a Girl Weep?" But as much as you can do that, obviously the better. Good sense of rhythm. Where's my phone? Sometimes you will play pieces that require rubato, but other times, and this is where we become a little more practical, other times you have to play pieces that are rhythmic, okay? And if not rhythmic, at least something that demands a steady tempo. In fact, one of the things that I think makes a very good congregational accompanist is the ability to not rush, but stay on the very front edge of the beat. You're almost rushing, but you're not quite. Because when we're in there in a reading session, and we have 300 people singing, do you think the tendency of the congregation left on their own is going to be to speed up or slow down? It's going to be to slow down. And so to counteract that, you've always got to be right on the edge of that beat, but not quite rushing, right? But just almost on, there's just a little pocket of space that you have there. Now with a smaller ensemble, you don't quite have that concern because you don't have 300 people singing. But as much as you can do to develop your sense of rhythm and keeping that tempo steady is much appreciated from a director. I can't tell you how much it's appreciated. How do we develop rhythm? Do we have any piano majors in here? Or old piano majors, okay? Did you ever practice with a metronome?
Hated it.
Hated it, okay.
Still make myself do it.
I thought that I have a metronome on here, but I might not. Oh, I do. You guys are in luck. Part of the reason, and I'm going to give you, you say this is an accompanying class, I know, but I'm throwing this out there because I want you to take a rhythmic accompaniment, and I want you to practice it this way, okay? In fact, let's get into one of these packets, and let's just do some sight reading of the piece. Yeah, you bet, no problem. No problem. I'll show you a couple of ways of working with the metronome that, let's get one that's either in 3/4 or 4/4. A way of working with the metronome that maybe you have not done before. Where's that everything to me? There it is. Okay. So this is in 3/4. This is actually a rubato piece. There's give and take to it. But let's pretend that it's not supposed to be. Okay, and it's supposed to be rhythmic. What most people will do when they get their metronome out is they're going to turn that click on, and it's going to be hitting on every beat. Right, so in other words, let's get something going here. The metronome says 88.
How about a 61?
All right, so most people are going to do this, right?
You didn't tell the whole story.
Okay, that's fine. But that's not really helping me develop my time. And you might say, well, why isn't it? It's giving me the click every beat. But that's the problem. It's giving me the click every beat, right? And it's not giving me the ability to feel impulses on my own. Okay, so let me tell you how I would practice this and just throw out a bunch of ways. The first thing that I would do would be to move this to the off beats. Okay? So I would not think 1, 2, 3. I would think 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That rushed. You can hear it. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay? Now that's helpful because we always spotlight the downbeat, but we never line up and make sure our in-between beats are rhythmically accurate, right? So when you shift that metronome over one place, then all of a sudden, wow, it makes things feel totally different. You can do that with scales too, by the way, right? Instead of that, I got that, by the way, from being a jazz player. You know, when a jazz player plays, I'm going to speed that up just a bit for my purposes right here. A jazz player would never, ever, ever, ever practice like this. That's too fast. Right? They would do this. Because what that's now doing is replicating a hi-hat, right, on the offbeats, okay? And so I learned something from that. You know, if that really develops rhythm there, then why can't it in more legit music, okay? So I would move it to the offbeats. How about this? This is another way you could practice with the metronome. What if, we're going to end up playing the piece a little faster than what it normally would be. So it's not going to quite work. Actually, it will. I'm going to move it down to about 32. And then I'm going to have this click on every one. And then that's going to leave 2 and 3 for me to fill, right? So 1, 2, 3, 1, I'm slow. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? Let's not stop there. Let's move it to every 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And then you know what's coming, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If you practice that, you'll be amazed at how your sense of time develops, right? And all of a sudden it becomes fun, right? Metronome's not fun for people because it's the same old every time, and they're not creative with how they use it, right? But if you do that, then all of a sudden, wow, this kind of makes it almost like a little game, which it is. And then also it starts to develop your own sense of time because the metronome's not giving me every beat. You know, it's giving me one beat, but then it's leaving, in this case, 2 beats for me to fill on my own. And then I'll give you another one, and then you fill the next 2. Right? Does that make sense? And after a while, you kind of turn a little bit into a human metronome. You know, a little bit, but that is a very worthwhile endeavor to becoming a good accompanist. I guarantee it. Or letter C, knowledge of the vocal instrument. I go fast through this because we've got a lot of stuff to cover, and I know that we're going to run out of time. This to me is another one of these no-brainer type things. Knowledge of how the voice works, I think, can greatly, of course, increase your ability as an accompanist. So I'm not going to go beyond that, other than just say if you have the extra time, or if you're in a situation where you might have a friend that's a good singer, learn some stuff about the voice, right? And understand how you sing in an ensemble, maybe a community ensemble, and you start to kind of pick out some things of how the voice works and where difficulties happen in the voice, and then you translate that into your accompaniment work, and you can kind of start to anticipate where problems would happen. Good sight reading ability. Okay, that of course is something that we want to value. Tell me how we increase our sight reading. Let me give you a couple of practical tips here. How do we improve our sight reading?
Sight reading.
Sight reading. I mean, you're right, Craig. That to a certain point, sight reading. The best way to learn to sight read is, in fact, to sight read. Okay. I believe that one thing that can really increase, and this is going to sound crazy, but one thing that will really help your sight reading, and also, by the way, your ability to transpose and play by ear, okay, which is also a good thing for an accompanist to be able to do, especially the transposition, okay, is to take this little exercise. And you're not going to believe it when I tell you, but this is what I would do. I had a choir director once that told me if I really wanted to learn how to sight read and how to transpose and be of use to singers, then pick out a hymn every week out of the hymn book, one hymn. Take that hymn, and if you're a decent pianist, you probably can play it on the spot, all the parts. Don't improvise, don't make it congregational. Just take the hymn and play it straight out of the hymn book. And then learn it in all 12 keys. And then take a week to do that, and the next week, pick another hymn and take it through all 12 keys. Okay? The sight reading part is being helped because you're reading parts, right? And that obviously helps you. The playing by ear part and the transposing part is being helped as you move it through the other 12 keys. And I will tell you that I don't have perfect pitch. I play by ear okay. I shouldn't downsize myself. I play by ear pretty well, really. But I didn't when I first started. I'm not one of these guys that just sat down at the piano and, oh, here's what's on the radio. And when you're taking a hymn and you're moving it through all 12 keys, the first 2 or 3 or 4 keys are rather painful. And it's an entirely intellectual experience. Okay, I'm playing an E, that's what's on the page, but I'm 3 steps above that, so E to F sharp to G. Okay, it must be a G in the alto part. It was intellectual like that for me. But by the time you get to about the 5th or the 6th key, something honest to goodness miraculous starts to happen. And your ear really does kick in. And you start, I can't explain it, it is magic. But by the time you've taken a few hymns through different keys, you'll be amazed how the intellect is still working, but all of a sudden your ear has kicked in, and it's starting to kind of guide you a little bit. Not to mention the fact that you start to get used to playing in every key, right? Who wants an accompanist that only plays in flats, but struggles with sharps, or vice versa, right? So you start to get that familiarity with music that is not incredibly difficult. Most hymns are not going to be that difficult to play. So I think that is, of incredible benefit. How many of you guys work with choirs that read open score? How many are lucky enough to nod? All right, tell me what you have learned about reading open score. And first off, do we know what open score is? Most of the music, yes, most of the music that we read at Alleluia, that we write for a small to mid-sized church choir, is going to be on what we call closed score. In other words, the soprano and alto share a clef, and the tenor and bass share a clef, and it's basically like a hymn book, right? Open score, of course, is when the soprano, alto, tenor, bass each have their own stave. We've seen it a couple times. Beckenhorst will use that more than other publishers because a lot of their music kind of calls for that level of complexity where you require a different staff for each part. So tell me some tips, and I'll tell you some of my tips, but how do you learn open score?
Think about the chords that you see instead. That's what I do.
Okay.
Part of the time. I
Uh-huh.
think about, instead of seeing every line linearly,
Uh-huh.
I think about how those notes fit into a chord, and you can't always do that.
Okay.
You can't do that on
Uh-huh.
sight.
Okay.
Go and write a little 4-part piece,
Mm-hmm.
and it reminds me of chord structure is kind of similar, perhaps a little bit what you said.
Okay,
But when I write it, it makes more of an imprint on me.
okay, okay.
So, just jotting it down,
Mhm.
maybe take the hymn I'm trying to, or whatever it is I'm trying to play,
Mhm.
and jot those down in
Mhm.
4/part. Get that chord
Uh-huh.
straight in my mind. So
Okay, okay,
it really helps.
okay. What else?
Sometimes I just cheat and I rewrite the notes.
Okay. And sometimes we're lucky enough to have a publisher that's nice enough to put a reduction.
Yeah,
But not everyone does that, okay? Well, everything that you guys have said is great, great, great advice. You know, you can pick up any kind of, you guys know the literature, you can pick up, you know, anything by Haydn or any of the classical masters and practice your reading with this. But here's what I would suggest to do. And hopefully you have a director that is well planned enough that you get the music at least a week, you know, or a couple of days in advance. We got Craig here on the front row saying, well, maybe. Some open scores are difficult enough that you physically cannot play everything, right? And so what I do in those cases, and this depends and presupposes a little bit of theory knowledge, but I do write down the chords. I do. There might be some passing tones and non-harmonic chord tones and stuff like that, but you know, it doesn't matter if I've got, you know, the sopranos in eighth notes and the altos are in eighth notes in another direction, and then the tenors are half notes, and then the tenth below that is a bass. You can kind of figure out what the overall sonority is. And if it's a C chord in first inversion, then when I get to that part, that's what I'm playing. You know, and that's going to be what gets me through that. And that requires a little bit of work, but that is, a harmonic analysis is always so vital in those kind of parts. The other thing that I do when I'm preparing open score is that I will actually highlight or circle either moving parts or difficult parts. Okay? Chances are the parts that are moving, they're going to be the most important, right? So that's what you would want to highlight, right? I mean, why, if you're an open score, it's tempting to want to play just that whole note that the basses have, but if the altos have the moving line, then that's what you need to give, okay? So you go through and you analyze what seems to be the most important line that needs to be brought out, or what seems to be the most difficult line. You know, if I've got altos that are moving stepwise around a major third, but I've got a soprano, you know, that's making that leap of a seventh, by the way, driven a fourth. That's what I always think of with sevenths. You remember that old commercial, maybe driven a fourth lately? Well, if they have that leap, then which one am I going to give? I better give the sopranos, right? Okay. What do you think, all parts being equal, and if everyone more or less has the same moving notes, what would be the most important parts to give?
The top and the bottom.
Yeah, that's what I do, the top and the bottom. If you can have the foundation and then you can have the top, then that seems to be good. Now, functional keyboard skills. What do I mean when I say functional keyboard skills? Any ideas?
Well, like sometimes you'll get a piece that the piano reduction is just bare bones, and
Mhm.
and the choir has the full orchestra
Mhm.
listening CD,
Mhm.
and they're like, well, we don't get all that.
Right.
So sometimes you try to
Right.
add some little extra parts to it.
Right. Well, you're right. When I say functional keyboard skills, what I'm meaning is an entire class of skills that fall out of the realm of just let's play a piece. You know, when people go into piano lessons, most of the time they'll develop technique and they'll practice, you know, their skills and stuff like that. But what they're also trying to do is, or what other classes in college try to develop is functional keyboard skills. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I'm talking about the skills that you need to just be a good musician at the keyboard. The ability to transpose, okay? The ability maybe to improvise, right? The ability to create a harmonization, you know, if you just have a lead sheet. When I taught college, I can't tell you how many times that I would have a pianist come in. We make all of our pianists to go through something called group piano, and I'm sure if you guys have been music majors, you've had your share of that too. You might have liked it or not. If you're piano majors, you probably didn't have to have it, because most of the time we make the non-keyboard instruments do that. But I would have people that, might be a singer, but they've had years of piano lessons, and so they come to group piano and they think, well, I'm going to just X out of this. I mean, all it is piano lessons, and, I can play a Clementi sonatina or something like that. But they usually don't do so well because they play their music well, but if you ask them to play something by ear or to, harmonize something or transpose, they're absolutely lost. So it's not uncommon in my group piano 1 class to have people that play incredibly well, but they've just not ever developed their functional keyboard skills, right? And so those kind of keyboard skills, I'm kind of attacking 3 and 4 at the same time, but those can be developed by working with teachers, by taking lessons at a local community college. The transposition I've already touched on a little bit with the metronome games that I love to give people. The harmonization, taking courses or finding good books, on like what we do here at the Alleluia conference, and taking lessons on how you harmonize. All those things are very valuable with that. Do we have anyone here that's a good improviser? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't know if I am or not.
Okay.
When I'm at home, I am. Here.
I gotcha. What? No, I'm not gonna put you on the spot. Don't worry.
Right.
Well, I tell you what, guys, that avenue of learning to kind of develop those skills is something that can be of so much value to you as an accompanist. Particularly nowadays, when the accompanist has to not only sit and play the choir anthem, but in the worship part of the service, well, hopefully the whole thing is worship, but in the congregational part of the worship service, you also have to play with a praise band, and kind of be able to improvise chords and not just kind of play what you see on the page. The ability to do that, is more and more kind of becoming valuable. And then another musical quality before we get into this last section is mind reading. You guys know what I mean when I say mind reading. I have worked with directors, and Mark was one of these, that I have developed such a kinship with him, a musical kinship, that I know where he's going. I know what he's going to do. And if we're singing along and the choir stops, I don't have to wait for him to say, tenors, let's start at measure 57. I've already queued up the parts by the time he gets the word out of his mouth, And a lot of that has to do with paying attention to the director's musical style. A lot of it has to do with simply listening yourself to the choir. Don't just sit there, But if you hear a problem somewhere, you can kind of guess that sooner or later the director's going to come back and attack that problem. But, the best compliment that was ever paid to me by a director was actually paid to me, not by Mark, but by another person I worked with, who said, gosh, when you're behind the piano, it's like you're inside my head. And to me, I couldn't have asked for a better compliment than that, because it means I was so, hopefully in tune with what this person's doing. All right, some ways to master your craft. We've hit on some of these, but here's quite a few other things that I'm gonna talk about. If possible, be prepared to play all the parts or the accompaniment at the first rehearsal. Okay, get your music ahead of time where you can do that. Now, if you're a really slick pianist and you're advanced pianist, then if you're doing an easy Brad Nix anthem where everything is written accessible, then you can probably sight read that thing backwards and forwards, right? But if you cannot, right, then learn the accompaniment, but also more importantly learn the parts, because chances are that's going to be what you're working with, right, at the first rehearsal or two. And don't just play SATB parts, okay? Practice different combinations. Practice the bass and the soprano. That's different. Believe it or not, playing the bass and the soprano of an SATB texture looks different and feels different than just playing the whole darn thing. I don't know why, but it does. Practice the inner parts. Practice what that alto line would be against the tenor line. It causes you to look specifically at lines and not at the structure as a whole. And it's very, very valuable. Practice those with the metronome, like what we've already demonstrated. When you're playing the parts and when you're practicing the parts, play them as beautifully as you can. And I'll talk about that in a minute with the pounding parts down there. But typically, what voice part has the melody?
Soprano.
Right. So when you practice your parts, highlight the soprano. How do you practice that? We always talk about voicing on the piano. We always want good voicing. We want wherever the melody is to pop out. What are some tricks to voice? Beyond just, well, I gotta just play that top note louder somehow.
Singing it in your head.
Okay. Okay, what else? That is correct. In other words, you just gotta understand where that melody is before you have a chance of bringing it out. Well, let me camp right here just for a minute. And like the metronome games, I mean, in the midst of all this talking, I'm kind of sprinkling things with some practical exercises that you can do. Let me show you how I would practice this. Let's go to some 4-part writing in this. Did I arrange this? Let's get in the right key. Sometimes I read music. Okay, sorry, I was playing B naturals instead of B flats, and I truly did arrange this piece. A great way to practice this, and this is something that will develop your ability to really accompany well and bring out different lines, not only accompanying, but also your solo playing, is to practice when you want to learn to voice something. Play all the tones at the same time. In this case, play all of the SATB tones. But then let go of everything except for the tone you want to be voiced. So in other words, I would practice this like this. Let's get those B's flat now. Why would that work? I used to do that with my classical literature all the time. Typically, when we think of playing something louder, we usually think of putting more weight into it. Now, that's the way we think. It's actually not true. Really, it's not. If you really think about what makes a loud sound at the piano, it's not weight. I weigh 180 pounds. But I can sit down on this piano so slowly that no sound is made, except a crack. Right? What really makes a loud noise at the piano is velocity. Right? The faster I play a note, the louder that note is going to sound. And then the slower that I put the key down, it can become so slow that no sound is made at all. Right? But for some reason, we often, in our physicalness of playing the piano, we equate weight with sound. I think it's really more velocity. Well, if I'm going to play, 2 tones and I'm going to voice one and not the other, if I practice like this, then I'm almost instinctively putting more velocity, more weight into the tone that I know I'm going to be holding, and the tone that I know I'm going to just touch and get off. I'm going to touch that with less. Okay? And so the deal is you practice like this a ton. Right? And then finally, you hold down both tones, but you try to generate that same feeling in your hand, what it felt like when you were going to let go of the lower tone. You just happen not to. Okay? And then you get the... Well, now I'm not even voicing the G. There it is. Right? Does that make sense? You get the idea? Okay? And you can have fun with that if you really want to increase your pianism. You could do the same thing. I'm going to voice out the alto. Well, I wrote a really fun alto part here. Right? Or maybe I would do the same thing with the tenor. That one's hard for me. I will tell you that one is hard. I would have to practice that a lot to be able to play a texture where... Well, actually, I was able to bring that tenor out pretty well, from practicing like that, okay? It's really remarkable how it works. And you can do it, by the way, with your solo literature, anything that you play. So don't be satisfied with just coming in and let me get the parts, but get the parts where you can really help your singers. Right? Anyway. Be common sense. Have your music organized in a binder in rehearsal order. Have your score marked. I'm going to say something about this. I can't tell you how many times, as much as I've worked well with directors, it took me a long time to realize that I need to mark my score. And when the director wants to add in an indication or a speed up, I thought for a long time in my musical intelligence that I would be able to remember that. And then after 10 times of him saying, Brad, remember we're slowing down here. Brad, remember we're slowing down here, I decided, okay, I probably should. I'm not going to remember this. I need to mark some things in. And so mark your score. And I would go above and beyond in order to facilitate your rehearsal with the measure numbers. Okay? Shawnee, every company has measure numbers different. Shawnee Press includes them at the beginning of each staff system. Beckenhorst includes a measure number for every measure, which is the ideal, I think. If the music you're playing does not have every measure numbered, I would go to trouble of doing it, right? I think it's so ridiculous. You think, my gosh, why would I do that, Brad? If you want me to go to a piece, a measure, I can find the nearest measure and then find it. It only takes a second. Yeah, but you know what? If you multiply that times an hour, times 100 instructions, then you've lost 2 minutes. Of a rehearsal time just in you trying to find your measures, right? So you be the first one there. Don't, have to be the last one there while the choir is ready to go. So honest to goodness, I'm 40 years old. I've been playing the piano my whole life, and when I would get a choir piece, I would measure every number. Every measure. Woo! It's the end of the day. So do that. Now, the other thing, I don't know if your director does warm-ups. A lot of folks don't, and unfortunately they should. A lot of choirs that only meet one time a week, and they might meet for an hour, they just feel like, gosh, we don't have time to warm up. We've got to get music ready for Sunday. If you do warm up, then you want to master your warm-up patterns. Right, every director has some that they like to do. I can list off 6 or 7 that directors have done. But I want to take that one step farther and say I would ask you to not only master your warm-up patterns, but you're going to help the choir warm up more effectively if you actually create some kind of accompaniment for the patterns. Okay, now I'll give you an example. Here's a warm-up pattern that we use. We call it zing-a-zing-a-zoo. Now, I'm not a singer. I'm a pianist, but the warm-up pattern is this. Zing-a-zing-a-zoo, 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 zing-a-zing-a-zing-a-zoo. We like to warm up with the zing, because say the word zing for me. When you say the word zing, it causes an arching in the soft palate, right? So it starts to create space in the mouth, which is what you want. So sing that for me. Okay, ready, go. Zing-a-zing-a-zoo, 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 zing-a-zing-a-zoo. Let's do it again. Right, so we can keep doing that, and you're going to sing with more energy and more authority. You had to learn it, I get that. But once you learn the pattern, then you're going to sing that with more authority than you would if I just played the notes, which is typically what happens. Directors warm up with this a lot. Mi, me, ma, some kind of vowel pattern. Why not do that? Let your singers be used to not only tuning with one another on individual notes, but let them start to hear their notes within the bounds of harmony. Sing that for me once. Mi, me, ma, mo, mu, oo, going down a 5-note scale. Ready, go. I'll play along with you this time. Okay, now do it again. Ready, go. They're going to respond better to that and sing more musically than they're going to if you just go, you like you're a machine, a mindless machine, going up. And so master your parts, your warm-up, not your parts, but your warm-up patterns that the director wants. But in addition to that, don't be afraid to start to embellish them just a little bit. We've already talked about, remember, the director is in charge of the rehearsal night. A lot of these now we've covered because I kind of, covered them as we went through the earlier portion of this. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in here in particular that I want to add, and I'm not. How are we doing on time? We've got about 10 minutes left. Do you guys have any questions or any additional thoughts or anything like that that we can kind of add to this? Anything that has helped you as an accompanist? Or maybe, we haven't even touched on this, there's a whole psychological world to accompanying in terms of how well do you get along with your director? And what do you have a great environment to work in, or do you what is the situation with that? So I've kind of gotten through my material. We'll finish up here with what you guys think. Any questions or thoughts?
It's more fun to work with a director that treats you as a colleague rather than as a underling.
Yes, right.
But sometimes you don't have that luxury, so you just have to.
Has anyone here ever served as a director? What would be the one thing that you wish your accompanist would know? If you could tell your accompanist, you're doing a great job, but without hurting your feelings, this is one thing that I would like for you to know that would serve me better and make this rehearsal go smoother. What would that be?
Read my mind.
Okay.
It drives me nuts when I'm ready to move and I'm like, page 3, measure 13, or page 2, second square, second measure, and I'm waiting for parts.
Yeah.
Okay, there. I get out,
So why is the pianist not reading your mind? Because this is helpful for all of the rest of us pianists.
In one instance when I had that, it was because she was just struggling in general. It was just,
Okay.
it was really above her. I mean, there were days when I had to bite my tongue because I wanted to just say, let me do it.
Yeah, right.
And the other time was because I think she was more engaged with what was going on out in the choir and who was chatting with
So
who
just
and who
not
was
paying
not
attention
paying a
to
lot
you.
of attention, yeah.
Okay.
Remember, this is a day of ADD, and some accompanists have ADD. It's difficult to stay on task.
I'd be interested in hearing some comments about how to deal with a director who is less musically talented than even the choir as a whole. I mean, you say, oh, Brad, at measure 13, did you mean for us to do X, Y, Z? Okay. And pretty soon they learn to say yes. Okay, I got you.
Okay.
I dealt with that for several years. And I wanted to throw things at him in worship from the, oh God, yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts with that? That's kind of an interesting situation that pianists get into a
The
lot.
thing not to do is say, are you gonna let them get by with singing that way on measure 14?
You really gonna let that go?
Yeah.
Hey, I'll add to that. This is kind of, I think, equally valid too, in addition to more practical things. One of the things I had to, this guy Mark that I've mentioned now a couple of times, that relationship I just loved with him. One of the things that I had to learn early on that he did not like, and he pulled me aside and told me he didn't like it, and I was fine with it, was that a lot of times people in the choir who knew me, because I was there before Mark was, they would say in the middle of rehearsal, hey, Dr. Nix, will you play this tenor part right here?
Oh, my goodness.
And I would play it. I didn't think anything about it, but I realized that what's happening is that the kid is circumventing Mark and coming straight to me.
Right.
And that can't happen.
Right.
It's got to go through the director. And so, you know what? After he told me that, I had about, a couple of students that would ask, and I'd say, you know what, you ask Mark. And then if he caught it, sometimes the kids would say, Dr. Nix, play, and he wouldn't hear it. But if he heard it, then he'd address the choir and say, folks, I appreciate you wanting to get these parts learned, and I'm going to help you. But just for me, all questions come through me. And so, that was a way that without even realizing it, I was kind of undermining his authority as the director in my attempt to be helpful, and provide what the student needed. So, one thing that can kind of help that, and is no matter what your choir requests of you, all requests funneled through the director. You know, and if he or she asks you to do it, then you do it. You know.
Dr. Nix, can I go to the restroom?
You certainly can. Anything else?
Sometimes I think that we as accompanists hear things that we think the director doesn't hear.
Mhm.
And so it bothers us and we want it corrected immediately.
Mhm.
And yet, they have a different plan. They're gonna get to that eventually.
Right.
But when we're over here going, you know, playing the tenor part as loudly as we can, then that's probably, I do this.
I do too, a
And-
pianist
and
always.
because you
the
hear it
altos.
and you want them
Yeah.
to get it and you think you're being helpful, but yet
Right.
it's obvious that, oh, well, the accompanist thinks we're getting this part wrong. I wonder why the director doesn't correct this. And so that's not a good thing to do.
Yeah, I
And
haven't
I'm very
thought of that.
guilty of it.
Yeah,
I'm very guilty of it.
yeah.
Because I play for my husband and I feel really too free with him, but then I play for 4 school directors too,
Right.
and I don't do that with them, and so I'm thinking, okay.
Right.
Maybe I ought to be as nice to him.
Yeah.
I've been in situations too where the director doesn't see a typo or something, where the music is actually wrong.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That happens more frequently than, you
Yeah.
know, I'd like to see.
Go ahead, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
I'm just saying, I sometimes, hello, you know, I mean, it's hard to work that in. So.
Yeah. I have found, the other thing that has helped me work well with directors, both in school and out of school, and this goes along kind of with what you're saying, is not as an accompanist raise up issues in front of them. Mark or whoever, we need to fix this. You know, if there's something that is going on that I hear that I'm afraid he might not hear, then if anything, I'll come to his office after rehearsal and I'll say, hey, did you catch this? I know you were busy doing something else. You might not have caught what was going on in the second tenors. You know, and so next rehearsal. And you know, if you have a director that you really get that kind of trusting relationship with after the rehearsal, he might come up and ask, hey, is there something that I'm missing here? I think I caught everything, but did you hear anything that needs to be addressed at the next rehearsal?
Right.
You know, and that's the fun, you know, where it really becomes a partnership.
I think building that, like, I'm in a really lucky spot now because, I mean, I do a lot of accompanying, but she hired me and said, you are the assistant director.
Yeah.
And I've known her for a long time, which helped as well, and sometimes we switch and I'm directing and she's accompanying.
Mhm.
And so we're in a comfortable place where, I mean, I don't just jump in, but sometimes I'm like, could we do the alto part again? Because on measure 13, they're flat on whatever.
Yeah.
And when the situation's reversed,
Yeah.
she may be playing, and all of a sudden she'll go, no.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I'm lucky. So I think if you have the right rapport and you talk about it, then
Right. And that sometimes takes some time to develop that. So, well, you know, this is a little bit of a mismatched session here because we've thrown out some practical things and some common sense things, and then kind of ended with maybe some philosophical ways of kind of getting along with the director. I know Larry Shackley offered a session on this, and I'm not sure. I purposely didn't attend because I didn't know what I didn't want to feel like we were covering the same thing. So hopefully we approached it from a couple of different ways, but I hope there's been some things that you've taken away that, you know, even if it's just metronome games, just something
It
that
was
you
only
have.
that first part about the personal qualities that had a big overlap. The rest of this is.
Okay,
all-
okay, well,
all
good.
Additional
Good,
stuff. yes.
good. Well, knowing Larry, he probably gave, I don't know, I wouldn't venture what all he gave, but the academic methodical teacher in me starts to say, well, here's a gazillion ways to master the metronome, you know, and here's the ways to practice voicing. All right, thank you guys. Have a great night, and we've got another half day, and we are done.